Journey by Vidyamala Burch. And so my name is Jess McNally, and I'm one of the Tergar facilitators in Canada. And we are, oh, sorry, I was hearing an echo. So welcome very much, everyone. We have over 4,000 people joining us today who've signed up from all over the world, and you're welcome to put in the YouTube chat where you're from. It's wonderful to see people from all over the world already. So welcome. I want to mention that today we will have some time to ask questions to Vidyamala from all of you. And so if you have any questions you'd like to ask, you can put those into the YouTube chat and we'll be collecting those, and Cortland can ask those questions to Vidyamala near the end of the program. So at this time, I would like to welcome Cortland Dahl, who is our uh, instructor in Tergar and also the executive director of Tergar International. And he'll be doing the interview today. And I will pass it over to you, Cortland, to welcome our guest. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jess, and welcome everyone, and welcome Vidyamala. It's wonderful to be here with you all and to be able to spend another hour in conversation with you, Vidyamala. So I'll just kick this off with a brief introduction. Hopefully, you all had a chance to read a bit about Vidyamala if you don't already know about her and her work. Honestly, I could spend an hour just talking about her amazing life journey and everything she's done to bring mindfulness into out into the modern world. But just to say a few of the key points, and we'll be able to dive deeper in our discussion. So Vidyamala is a member of the Triratna Buddhist order. She's been meditating for decades. She's an author. She's been teaching meditation and teaching compassion practices, mindfulness practices for decades. But I think perhaps the most important thing about Vidyamala's life and work is that she's really a true pioneer, and that she's brought not only mindfulness into the modern world and been part of this broader movement of bringing these ancient wisdom practices into more accessible forms that all of us can use in our daily lives. But she's actually done that in two different ways. It's hard enough to be a pioneer and to really influence a new field in even one area, but to do it in two is even more remarkable. So she founded an organization called the Breathworks Foundation, which was really the first organization to create a program to use mindfulness and meditation practices for people dealing with pain, chronic stress, and things like that. So mindfulness-based pain management was the program that has delivered, and it really has pioneered this entire field of using mindfulness practices in a way for people to deal with things like chronic pain. So fast forward to these days, and hopefully we'll hear more about this from Vidyamala in our discussion. She's also now building on that early program, a new program called mindfulness-based lifestyle medicine, which is expanding that even further, again, using mindfulness, but in really new, creative ways so that we can improve things like diet, exercise, sleep, really all the kind of stuff that we hear all the time that we need to have more of or need to do better with in our lives, but it's not easy to do it. So Vidyamala is really pioneering yet another new field and at the forefront of this entire movement. So she's had a tremendous influence and impact on many lives. Breathworks has taught over 100,000 people how to use these practices in their daily lives. She has received many awards and accolades, including the Order of the British Empire, which is, for those of you in the US, it's kind of like the Congressional Medal of Honor. Or if you're in another country, just imagine really the greatest honor the government bestows upon individuals who have really made a positive impact on society as a whole. So really just a tremendous honor, acknowledging the huge impact she's had on so many lives. So Vidyamala, it's an honor to have you with us. We've been looking forward to this discussion for quite some time. So maybe you'll just kind of dive right in here. A lot of your work, the things that you've done out in the world are based on your own personal journey, your own experience with chronic pain. So perhaps you could just talk about your own life and how you got connected to these practices and how you connected to what eventually has led to all this amazing work that you've done in the world.
Thank you so much, Cortland, and thank you, Tergar, for inviting me. And it's a tremendous honor to be here today. And I met Cortland up in Edinburgh last year, and we made a lovely connection at an event hosted by Mingyur Rinpoche. So it's really a delight to be talking to you again today. Fantastic. Yes, so how did I get into meditation? Um, well, I was brought up as an Anglican in New Zealand where I lived, but I didn't really connect with the church particularly. So, I was sort of nominal. And then I was very, very active, very sporty, and the career that I was pursuing, I really wanted to do was to be a wildlife officer in the New Zealand mountains. So that was my kind of dream, to be out there in the wilds. With all the magnificent creatures in New Zealand, very, very beautiful, climbing mountains, all that kind of thing. And then when I was 16, I injured my spine. So I had a condition, a congenital condition I didn't know about, where I effectively fractured my spine. I had surgery 6 months later, major surgery, and then there were quite serious complications from that. So more major surgery 6 months after that. So that put paid to all my dreams. I had all these dreams of being very, very physically active. And I was going to go off to vet school and all these sorts of things. In the end, I never went to university because I missed a year of school effectively at the crucial time. So there I was, this young woman, damaged body. I could still walk at that point, so I was still fairly mobile. These days, I had to use crutches or a wheelchair for mobility. But I had this pain. I was left with chronic pain in my back and in my legs. I just pushed it away for a long time, went into denial for a long time, which I think is very, very common when catastrophe strikes. We just pretend it hasn't happened, and we go into this weird sort of parallel universe of I was just driving myself in all kinds of not very helpful ways. And then when I was 25, I ended up back in hospital. I had some more tests that went wrong, had a paralyzed bladder, ended up in intensive care because they thought that I had a raging infection. I didn't, as it turns out, but I was very, very poorly. And when I was in the intensive care ward, I had a very significant moment that has changed the course of my life. So it didn't come out of meditation initially, but meditation came from this experience. I'll say more about that in a moment. But the experience was where I was, in a way, on the brink of madness. Often people think that these big sort of opening experiences or experiences that give rise to an inner quest come out of something very positive or some sort of bliss or something like that. Well, in my case, it was absolute hell. So I was feeling just absolutely desperate, and I had this whole thing in my mind about how was I going to get through till the morning. I'd had a particular test and I needed to sit up for 24 hours and I couldn't sit up. So it was so interesting. It's such an interesting thing when you have to do something that you can't do or that you think you can't do. So I was getting myself in a right state. And, I can't get through till the morning. You have to. I can't. You have to. And then eventually this voice came in, and I've talked about this a lot. And I always say, I have no idea where that voice came from or who it was or what it was. But the voice said, you don't have to get through till the morning. You just have to live this moment and this one and this one and this one. And I knew that I could do that. So something rose up inside me, very, very powerful, this kind of very deep knowing that not only could I do that, but that I'd also heard the voice of truth, that this idea that we only live our lives now, we only live our lives now, that it was like in my bone marrow. I kind of knew it in every cell of my body, every cell of my being. And all this torture about the morning was being created by my mind. And all the torture about the past and all my loss was being created by my mind. But the only thing I knew was right now, and yes, I can bear this now, and I can bear it now, and I can bear it now. So I often say that this was the kind of axis upon which my life has turned, this experience of, I can articulate it now as if it was lovely and clear. Of course it wasn't. You know, I was a confused young woman. I was in a state of utter desperation, very, very weak, enormous pain. But nonetheless, there was a knowing. I knew something had happened. And then, probably coincidentally, who knows why these things happen, a few days later, the team sent the hospital chaplain to see me. I think they didn't really know what to do with me because there wasn't a medical solution. You know, the message I was getting was you need to learn to live with your situation. So this hospital chaplain came to see me, beautiful man, elderly man. I think the fact that he was elderly was significant. It was like he had a lot of life in him. And he took my hand, you know, he sat by my bed and took my hand. And he said, I want you to remember a time in a place where you were happy. Simple question. So I remember being in the Southern Alps of New Zealand where I had been ecstatic as a teenager, absolute ecstasy, super fit on the top of peaks, just like, oh, yes. So I remembered that. And I don't know how long this little practice was, maybe 10 minutes. Not long. But when he brought me out of the meditation, this very simple little visualization, I felt really different. And I was like, wow, you know, same girl, same hospital bed, but I feel really different. I feel much happier. I feel much more positive, hopeful. And I knew again, I thought, well, what's happened? And I thought, well, you've done something with your awareness. I'd never heard of meditation, never done meditation. As I said, I wasn't religious. But there was the sense of, oh, my experience has changed by what I've done with my mind, what I've done with my awareness. So in a way, these two things of, you know, what does it mean to be fully present? And that's actually all there is. And how can I train my awareness? How can I train my mind so that I'm not tormented, but I have a positive, rich, fulfilling life? So those were the two things that began my journey, really.
That's amazing. So inspiring. You know, the point you made about, you know, the fact that we often think that these moments of growth or self-discovery, you know, they happen on the mountaintop when it's all blissful and joyful and it's just this wonderful experience. But actually, when you hear stories like yours, you know, and I think of some of the most inspiring people, you know, that we think of in life, like one story that's always inspired me is Nelson Mandela, you know, and of course, a lot of the, you know, his, what led to him being the global leader he was these years, decades of being imprisoned, you know, in just horrific conditions. And there's so many stories like that. But it doesn't feel good in the moment. We somehow have this fantasy that somehow like these amazing breakthrough moments is going to happen without the pain and difficulty. And what yours shows is that it actually is through the darkness that we discover the things that are most meaningful in our lives and some of the biggest breakthroughs. So I'm curious how that led that initial insight you had. So clearly you had some more intuitive insight that was leading you towards mindfulness and meditation. How did that connection get made, and how did you get on that path? And you know what eventually led you to form breathworks and all the things you've done?
Yeah, thank you. Great question. So there I was in this hospital. I'd had these two experiences. I kind of knew, I don't even think he called it meditation, this chaplain, but I sort of knew, oh, I think that's meditation. And when I came out of the hospital, I had a really wonderful social worker. And I said to her, I really want to learn to meditate. Can you get me some tapes from the library? This was in the days of cassette tapes, you know, eons ago. And I said to her, I really, really want to train my mind. I want to figure out what is this meditation thing. So she got me just tapes from the local library. And I had months pretty much lying on my back in bed. So I was in this state of prolonged rehab. But the thing I got from that was time. It's very, very interesting. You know, I got more time to lie down and watch my mind that most people have. So it was a bit like a retreat. I've never thought of that before, actually, but in a way, I was a bit like in an enforced retreat. I did live with other people in a flat, but I had, you know, hours and hours and hours lying on my back looking at the ceiling, watching my mind. I trained myself to think, which was interesting. I trained myself to think a topic through right to the very end, which I'm not very good at anymore. I think because my life got more busy, but that was very satisfying. And I did these meditation practices every day. And then the interesting thing And I think it goes back to that night. It's like I knew that I had no idea how to live my life. So in a way, I didn't have very much pride. And I think sometimes it's pride that prevents us having these sort of insights. Like in the middle of the night, I had no idea how I could get through till the morning. And maybe it was that being a bit sort of my ego being stretched so far that something else could get through. So likewise, when I was in this phase of rehab at home, it's like, well, I have no idea how to live my life. I'd lost my job. I was working in film as a film editor. I knew that I was never going to do that again. No income. And I had this friend called Warwick. So Warwick was great. And Warwick would try lots of different things. So Warwick would come to me and say, hey, I'm doing this thing. Do you want to come? So I'd always say, oh, yeah, good. Because I had the loss of pride meant that I was willing to try anything. And I did try loads and loads of quite weird things during that phase. But the first really significant one was when he said he was going on a yoga weekend. And I'd never done yoga. So we went off to this ashram in the country for a weekend. Got up at 5 a.m, did an hour's yoga, and I was stiff as a plank. This was when I was more mobile, but I was certainly not a yogi. Let's say that. So I was trying to do this yoga, and then we'd sit to meditate for quite a long time on very uncomfortable cushions. But what was interesting on that weekend is I was desperate to leave after about a morning. I thought, I just have to leave. This is awful. I can't bear it. And we had to do some work in the garden. And I still remember lying behind the cabbages, looking up at the sky, just crying, sobbing, and thinking, oh God, I can't bear it. I was so much pain. But because I couldn't leave, I had to sort of get through something. And by the end, I'd really broken through. By the end, it was like, oh, yes, I can move a bit more than I thought I could. And there's something in this meditation that they're doing. So then I really got into yoga and meditation through this ashram that had a city base as well. And a lot of that was brilliant, but I wasn't quite sure about some of the sort of structures within that organization, and it was very hierarchical and a little bit shaming looking back on it. So then Warwick said, hey, I'm going on a Buddhist weekend. Do you want to come? This was, I don't know, after 6 months. And so I said, oh, yeah, good, I'll come. So we went off to this Buddhist weekend with the Triratna community. Beautiful place on the shores of Auckland Harbour. And it was all just, it was kind of less intense in a certain way than the ashram. But the main thing that I was struck by was the people. It wasn't even the teachings, it was the people. These people were light-hearted, they were warm, they were friendly, they were kind. And I always say that this was the first time I'd really met people who were comfortable in their own skin. Oh, God, it was so attractive. They weren't trying to be anything special. They were just kind of, they'd sort of done the work to be comfortable with who they are. Extraordinary, ordinary is what I often say. And I remember thinking, oh, I really want to be like that when I grow up. That kind of, when you're like, I was 27, 26, something like that. And a lot of them were a lot older. And it was like, oh, so I want to be like that. So that's how I got involved in Buddhism. And for me, it all just kind of fitted. And then I really loved the teachings when I got more familiar with them. Really loved the friendships. And actually, when I came to the Tergar event in Edinburgh last year, there was this very similar flavor to the Tergar community as the Triratna community. So then I got very involved in Buddhism through this community, Triratna, because I had time again. I wasn't at work, so I went on a lot of retreats. And at that point, if you wanted to go deeper in Triratna, it was based in the UK. So it was going to be difficult for me to really go deep in New Zealand. So again, I mean, I've done some quite irrational things in a way. I just came to England. I mean, I arranged it, but I left New Zealand and moved to England when I was 30 to live in a retreat centre in the country, a retreat centre for women called Taraloka. Just left my New Zealand life, went to live there, terrible back. My back was still very, very painful. But I knew I needed to do that. Again, it was an intuition. I had been for a visit about a year earlier, and I remember standing in the kitchen, and again, a voice said, I need to live here. Just very clear. This is what I need. I need immersion. In a way, I needed to be away from my culture, just sort of, again, sort of break free of some conditioning, I suppose, and be there. So that was a remarkable period from 30 to 35 when that was my ages, 30 to 35, which are quite significant years in a human life. And very healing. So I lived with about 12 other women, different times. And again, people who've lived in these kind of situations, you're there because of shared ideals rather than because you like each other. So
That's a good way to put it.
there's always
the challenges of community for sure.
Yeah. But they, I was still in denial. I was still kind of braced. I was still pretending I was fine. And they were very skillful because I'd be doing my I'm fine, everything's fine thing. And they wouldn't argue, they wouldn't oppose. They'd just kind of smile and nod with kindness in their eyes. And very gradually, I let myself fall apart. I let all the kind of bracing begin to sort of soften. And I like to think that they kind of scooped me up and they loved me. And they, it's the first time really I think I've allowed myself to be loved and also learn how to love others. So I did need that time, and it was hard, really hard, and really amazing.
Wow, what a beautiful story. What you mentioned about the people you met and how that was kind of your gateway in so resonates and reminds me of things in my life where I've always been a semi-functional introvert in the world. So my impulse is always to kind of be sort of on my own, and I'm comfortable with that. But I think it's very much what you said. It's meeting people, both teachers, but also just ordinary people. And exactly as you described it, feeling like, wow, what are they doing? How they just, and it's exactly the profound ordinariness that you mentioned. There's nothing that you can point to, like they have some great charisma or anything like that, but it's just this ease, the sense that they feel at home in their own skin and in the world.
Yeah,
I'm
and
curious.
I think it's good
Please
to
go ahead.
just to come back to that very briefly. I think again, it's good that we speak of that because I think sometimes people think the entry will be through the teachings, and it might be for some people, more through its conceptual understanding. But I think it's also a really rich path when the entry is through the exemplars, through the people, through friendship and through community. I think it's really, really something to be valued, and it's very important.
Yeah, it's so true. I think a lot of people aren't necessarily thinking they're looking for community, when they get involved with meditation or other things that, could be many different areas. But ultimately, we're social creatures, and, it's when we really connect with other people, and so much of what we learn, we're in this information overload society, and we think learning is all about the information we get. But actually, so much of learning and even the human brain is really just through interactions. It's through seeing other people, and that's where the sense of possibility of what's possible for us opens up. In hearing your story, one thing that it reminds me of is this might be a strange way to put it, but the difference between pain and suffering. And I'm reminded of, in my own life, there was sort of two, in the way that pain for you was the thing that prompted you on this journey. I think for me it was pain, but more emotional pain, like really intense social anxiety. I always joke that, I do a lot of public speaking now. That was the thing that I was phobic of and deathly afraid of. And in many ways was the prompt for me, and what got me started was really intense social anxiety that I had, when I was 19, 20 years old. And I also had a lot of pain, incidentally, a lot of I think not probably nearly as intensely, but I'd had a series of car accidents over 2 or 3 years, and had a lot of back pain and leg pain. So it's just sitting was never a pleasant experience. It was always, how do I deal with this pain? But one of the things on both an emotional level and with that more physical level that I started to see was how much I had equated pain with suffering, as though they're just the same thing, that, pain is just always going to happen, and therefore I was always going to suffer. And if I was just an anxious person, and therefore I was always going to suffer because of that. And I had these pain issues, and I was always just it was just sort of part of my identity, almost like as though it was not even an option for me. And meditation for me really helped to tease apart some of the the not optional stuff of human life. We have bodies, we're going to experience pain, we have emotions, we're going to have ups and downs with that, but all of the kind of the turmoil that comes along with that. I'm curious from your own life, because it was just such an intense journey you were on with all the physical issues you experienced. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or insights around that distinction between pain and suffering, and what your journey was in disentangling that in your own experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely crucial when one's beginning to learn how to get your life back, if you've got these kind of issues. So at Breathworks, absolutely central to the program we do there, the mindfulness-based pain management program, is this model that we call distinguishing primary and secondary suffering. So we use the language of primary and secondary suffering, but in some ways, pain and suffering is probably better. So it's helping using the awareness and kindness. So awareness and kindness for me are just, two sides of the same coin. So when I talk about mindfulness or awareness, it's not some sort of cool, aloof kind of watching. But it's very warm, caring, loving, the way you would naturally respond to a loved one who was hurting. So you bring that attitude to yourself, and then come really close. And what is actually happening? What is this back pain? What is this leg pain? What is the experience? And the primary is the sensations. So right now I've got sort of crawling, burning sensations in the soles of my feet. I've got some nerve pains in my legs. I've got some sort of slightly stabby pains in my lower back. I can't do anything about that. It's a given. It's here. As you say, it's just part of the deal of this moment, is these sensations. And if we're not aware, we unconsciously, or it might be conscious, I don't know, but we automatically resist. So if I wasn't aware and I was doing this interview, I'd probably be holding my breath. I'll be sort of pulling away from that experience. I probably have some thoughts that, again, I wouldn't be aware of, which is, oh my God, how can I get through it in the next half hour? And oh, it's a disaster. And my voice will come up here and I get anxious and I'll get tight. And then straight away, I'm creating a whole lot of extra suffering. And I'm creating all that extra suffering through my lack of awareness. But if I'm aware, I can sort of rest down into my chair, let gravity hold me. I don't need to grip onto my body, let gravity hold me. Notice, this is also very important, notice that these sensations that are unpleasant are changing all the time. They're not static. They're not the enemy. They're not a thing. Like in my feet, it's kind of, it's almost like a bit of music, these sensations. Coming, some sort of moments of a bit louder, a bit quieter, but you sort of rest in the flow of experience. You soften the resistance, or even let go of the resistance. And in an early Buddhist text, actually called the Salatha Sutta, the Buddha talks about it being resistance and resentment, which is very good. So we have a sensation, and then we don't know of anything other to do than to resist it and resent it, and then we get more suffering. So you're sort of letting go of the resentment and the resistance gradually over time. It takes a lot of practice and training. And then you just learn how to accept sort of, I don't know, sort of, even acceptance is an interesting word, but you learn how to be with that flow of experience as it is. It's got the flavor that you might label unpleasant. And all that other secondary stuff can just fall away. So here I am sitting here talking to you, really enjoying it. I don't feel anxious. My breath has dropped deeper in my body. I haven't got lots of secondary tension going on in my body. And that is an altogether more pleasant experience than if I was up here thinking, oh my God, that's too much. I'm making a mess of this and I can't bear it. That would be much more, to be honest, like 30 years ago, that was my norm. But with training, now I can just be here with you thinking, this is a nice way to spend an hour of my life. And it's like I've got the sensations there, rising and falling, but I don't need to do all that secondary stuff. And in my own observation, it sounds like you're the same. And also with all the people I've taught, it's the secondary stuff that's ruining your life. It's not the sensations, which is very, very interesting, isn't it? That it's the anxiety and the fear and the panic and the breath holding and the tension and that's what causes the distress, not the rise and fall of sensations in the body.
Yeah, I think that was for me the huge insight. I mean, maybe more than anything else is kind of a life-changing insight. It seems so simple, but exactly what you said. I remember being a 19-year-old college kid, just learning to meditate and having this intense social anxiety, but yet being in the situation where I could either totally isolate myself, which was kind of awful, and I basically did that and tried that. That was not working out. But then going out and trying to meet, make friends, going to parties and things like that. And I remember sitting in these social situations. Like I have a memory of being at a party, a college party, back when I first learned to meditate like 30 years ago, and just bringing awareness, just as you described with the physical pain, to the emotional experience, and seeing that it was just the beginning of shifting away from that resistance. I wouldn't say the resistance was gone, but it was almost opening up for me that there's a different possibility, that to be with the experience rather than to be consumed by it and to completely get caught up and identify with it. And then seeing, again, exactly as you said, that I had been thinking that it was the anxiety, which was like the feelings in my body or the loop of thoughts in my head that was causing the suffering. But seeing there was something more about the relationship to that was actually where the pain was. That when I was just observing this buzzing nervous energy in my solar plexus, which is one of the things I can remember, that actually wasn't so bad. It's somehow like the emotional charge would dissipate, and it was pain without the suffering. In fact, I don't know who came up with this, but I one time heard this equation that suffering equals pain times resistance.
Yeah. Yeah. I
And I
think it
thought
might
that
have
was so
been,
resistant, so beautiful, because
yeah.
it's not pain plus resistance, which would mean it's actually the suffering. If the resistance goes to zero, actually if the resistance goes to zero, the suffering goes to zero.
Yes.
And then it's just pain without suffering. And that, even as a possibility for me, was a revelation that I could have all this social anxiety or the physical pain, and somehow everything that was so difficult about that could begin to ease. So that was
Yeah,
such a
that's
good
it.
description.
Yeah, very, very inspiring. And to hear your experience. And what I often say to people as well is learning to work in this way or train in this way. It's a training in courage.
Yeah.
Because in order to do this work of sort of disentangling, you have to be willing to, we often use the language of turning towards the experience, but I'm not sure that's quite right, because then people sometimes they've got to sort of stare it out,
Yeah.
but it's more you've just got to be with the experience and very gradually sort of edge your way in a little bit. What's actually happening? What's my experience? And that takes tremendous courage. But what comes out of that in my own experience, which has really surprised me, is just becoming much more lighthearted. Like for me, I'm much more lighthearted now than I was 30 years ago. And 30 years ago, when I was 35 years ago, starting to meditate, I wouldn't have thought that lightheartedness would be one of the outcomes. I would have thought I'd probably become more serious and more earnest and, sort of po-faced. But by learning but I think the lightheartedness comes because working the way you and I are describing, we're just being with what is. So, I often say it's hard being human. It's not like, doing all this work suddenly makes it easy. It's hard being human. It's hard having these bodies and this world that we live in. So if you can learn to be with that honestly, you're not having to sort of turn away from it or somehow manipulate it for your happiness, but to be able to be with it and then change your relationship with it by letting go of all the secondary stuff, then, you get confidence, you get courage, and you also get this kind of ability to just hold things a bit more lightly, which we certainly see, with Mingya Rinpoche, with my teachers, Matthew Ricard, who was at the conference, these guys, they're just so lighthearted. It's so beautiful, isn't it?
It's always amazing to me that they're oftentimes so funny. Like
Yes.
there's this ease and humor and
Yes.
lightheartedness. And
Yes.
yeah, exactly. You'd think if you didn't know anything about this world that like, yeah, you're just like this super intense seriousness, but it's not at all. There's a lightness and a warmth and a care like that just sort of that seems spontaneous.
Yeah, and
I'm
I
curious.
mean, I always trust people that are funny. It's a bit like,
Yeah.
you're so kind of confident that you can confident, and able to be with experience, that you can also joke around with it a bit. I think that's magnificent.
Yeah, it's so true. What have you found to be the most helpful in working with people as you have? I mean, you've now worked with, more than 100,000 people, teaching people how to deal with chronic pain, how to deal with these just other overwhelming life experiences, and having gone through it yourself. What do you find that people that really helps unlock people's minds around just seeing that there's a different possibility? What have you found anything, little kind of practices or insights that for people who are just getting started, what is it that is that easy first step for people just to see the potential that they might have?
Yeah, that's a really great question, because obviously, if someone's got huge suffering and then the instruction is turned towards your suffering and unpack it into primary and secondary, well, that's not very attractive, is it? Because
Yeah, it
it's
sounds horrifying. Like, oh, just be friends with this thing that you've hated your whole
exactly,
life or feared your
exactly,
whole life. It's like, what? Why would I do
exactly.
that?
I know exactly, and I remember years ago, actually, I'd sometimes read some stories about people who'd worked with difficulty by turning towards it, and I just thought, well, they're clearly not really, or the theory of it, and I thought, well, they've clearly not really got pain, because who that in their right mind would do that? So what I often do is I just give people a body scan,
Mm,
give people a body scan meditation, and the way I lead it, and the we lead it at Breathworks, is there's quite an emphasis on care, on pleasure, on rest. If you go to sleep, that's fine. It doesn't matter. You're probably tired. So it's not a kind of sort of bare awareness through the body. It's a very loving, coming into the body, coming into the different parts, being soft, being caring. And often, or most of the time, people find it quite pleasant. And so and if you do a body scan, you end up in your body. So you end up much more embodied. And of course, that's a frightening prospect if you've got a painful body and maybe you've learned to avoid it by just being in your head. And then someone says, hey, you need to be in your body. You think, well, no, thanks. But if the invitation is, hey, well, just try this body scan, just try it. Lie down, pay a lot of attention to your comfort, check you've got the right pillow height, do you need a blanket, all these kind of things. And when we first used to run the programs, this was very moving, actually. We used to literally tuck people in. So
mm.
we'd get them on the floor, and then we'd come around with blankets, and we would literally tuck them in, and we'd give them eye bags for their eyes, these little sort of slightly weighted bags. We stopped doing all that with the pandemic for the sort of health and safety dimensions. And a lot of our work's online now, so we can't do that. But the tucking in was a hugely significant part of what we were doing. So people feel cared. So I think, I often say doing a body scan, it's coming into awareness through the back door. So you're not saying to people, hey, walk through the front door into your body, because they're going to say, no, it's too frightening. But if it's like, just lie down and see what happens. And if you go to sleep, that's fine. And let me tuck you in. Then they end up thinking, oh, it's possible. It's possible to be in my body more. It's possible to be softer in my body. So I think starting with the body scan's important. Community again. So at Breathworks, we've got a big online community. And within that, I've got a group called Mindfulness of Pain and Illness Group. They affectionately call themselves the MPIGs, the MPIG group. And you witness other people who are on the same journey. And I think that's very important. So it's not, just a teacher and then you, but there's a whole community of peers. So I think that really, really helps. Short meditation practices, things like a 3-minute breathing space. So you're just micro practices, just gradually coming in to the body. So you're gently, I think, is the main thing that I would say. And kindly, gently and kindly.
The point about simple practices and short and not being too idealistic about it. So many of us, get this idea that we need to somehow be super meditators on day one. I certainly had that. And when I look back in my experiences meditating, I think most of my formal meditation, I was very distracted. I mean, my mind, I just had this torrent of thoughts, and I was almost years before that began to ease up. in some respects, it was probably the time I spent driving around delivering pizzas, honestly, again, as working my way through college, that was in a way sometimes where the more profound practice happened. Because even just doing what you were saying, bringing awareness into my body, into my breath, but somehow without all the expectation, because I was just bringing a little mindfulness into daily life, and I was doing an activity that was relatively easy to do that because I didn't need to be thinking a lot. And I think that can be so helpful. The other thing that what you're sharing reminds me of is that, we hear this language like, oh, we should become friends, with our inner demons, our experiences. You're talking about chronic pain, my anxiety. Everybody has something. It might not be pain or anxiety, but every one of us, unless you're completely enlightened, you have something, right? You have a short fuse, you have, old traumatic memories. I mean,
And
whatever it might
interestingly,
be.
even if the Buddha was seen to be
Mhm.
completely enlightened, he had physical pain.
Right.
Very interesting. He had a completely liberated mind in response to the physical pain, but it's evident from the scriptures that he had physical pain because he had a body.
Exactly. And it's something interesting in your journey is about the path to getting to that acceptance and to where maybe eventually it does feel like a friendship. You can relate to things with warmth. My experience is that that's a very long and not linear up and down path.
Yeah.
At the beginning, it's not like, oh, you're going to be friends with this emotion that you've been fearing and hating, part of yourself that you've been going to war with, for years or decades. So it's almost like at the beginning, like forget about friendship. It's like, can you just stay in the room without running out? Like,
Very
are you
good.
willing to just,
Yeah.
even for just 30 seconds,
Yeah.
not run out of the room screaming, when this thing happens, and like that itself is a profound first step. So I wonder if you could just talk, again, from your own experience or in working with so many people, how do we do that in a way that doesn't set up a false expectation that we should just flip a switch and we are suddenly
Yeah.
best friends with our inner demons?
Yeah. Very, very good. Thank you. Yeah. And the language is, of befriending. That's not going to be very easy to understand at the beginning of the journey. And I think what you've just said, if I can just stay in the room for a bit, and it might be a really big room, like here's this massive pain and I'm this little person over here, but I'm managing to stay in the room. That's really good. I mean, sometimes people say things like, my pain is a gift. I've never got on with that language myself. I'd rather not have my pain, even though in some ways my life's journey has been completely kind of colored by this experience, and I now have a really wonderful life in many ways. I don't know if in fact, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have done the work without my pain, but I'd still rather not have it. It's like, I don't think, oh, thank you for this gift. I think, well, it's not been an easy life. And
Yeah.
yes, it's helped.
Pain never becomes pleasant. It's always
Pain
pain.
never becomes pleasant. Yeah, exactly. I mean, maybe I'll do this little demonstration I sometimes do, which I think is quite good in terms of how to come. In fact, there's two little exercises that might be helpful for the viewers. Maybe I'll do the other one first, which is what I call the fist exercise. And this is, again, anyone can do this as your first little experience of how we can let go of some of that contraction. So if you make a fist with one hand, and what's happened to your breathing?
Mm.
What's happened to your breathing, Court?
Yeah, yeah. You can immediately feel
Yeah,
a sense of contraction and tightening.
exactly. Isn't it interesting? Okay, so now imagine breathing into the fist. And what does the fist want to do?
Yeah, I can just once to open, I could immediately relaxed, and
Yeah. So isn't that
even when I was
interesting?
holding the fist, I could the energy just opened a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. So the fist here represents your pain, your anxiety, whatever it is that you don't want. Any contracted state in the body, heart, mind is like a fist. And then straight away we breath hold. So then we got the contraction plus the breath holding. So we've got the secondary suffering. And then because we're getting tight, we hold a bit more breath holding. And by simply noticing that, so that's the mindfulness, then mindfulness is, look, I'm tight and I'm holding my breath. And then you have a choice, which is the outcome of mindfulness. Behavioral outcome of mindfulness is choice. So, okay, do I keep on doing that? Or maybe I can, let me just soften into that. And then that contracted state eases a little bit. So that is like something you can do in 5 seconds.
So
and
helpful.
very powerful. So that's one little demo. And the other demo is I often talk about what we're trying to do with our approach is to find a middle way between denial and overwhelm. So rather than befriending, that may be the outcome, but again, that can be, I've got to be best friends with my pain. That's a big ask, as you say. But if you sort of think, so this is my hand, right? And when you're in denial, you're doing that, and then you're trying to live your life over here. Yeah, does that look familiar? So it's like, and the pain is sort of dominating through avoidance. So I'm having to put all this energy into pushing it away, and I'm over here, a bit hectic. Go away, sort of strung out, ungrounded, tight, probably quite driven, running away from myself. So then you might get the language of turn towards the pain. Oh, you just need to learn to turn towards the pain. So then what people do is they do this. Yeah.
Right.
So, and I call this the octopus. So then it's like, oh my God, the only thing in my entire world is the pain. So you're going around your life and you've got this octopus stuck on your face. So this is overwhelm. So then the middle way is obviously that's not great either. So the middle way is you're not doing that anymore. You're just letting it into your field of vision, but you got everything else as well. And so you're going through your life. Here's the pain. Here's everything else. So it's not overwhelmed. You're not staring it out. Neither are you pushing it away, but you just have it here as your companion. Might be a friend, might just be a companion. And I think that seems to work for people. And of course, it's very dynamic. So it's not as if you just do that once and for all. But and again, this is the awareness piece, the kindness and awareness piece that when you're getting overwhelmed, you notice that, I'm overwhelmed. What can I do? Let me just broaden my perspective. What else is in the moment? Look at the sky, listen to the birds, feel your body your bum on the chair, feet on the floor. And then if you notice you're doing this, running, then you think, oh, come on, look, you're just running away from yourself again. So, okay, just drop back, ground. What's my actual experience? What's the sensations? Oh yeah, I've got these sensations in my feet, feel my bum on the chair, breathing on my belly. So it's a process of calibrating, and it's very dynamic. Mindfulness and awareness is not a static state, but it's a continual sort of adjustment depending on what's needed.
So helpful. Yeah, just listening to you, I can just feel some of what you're sharing.
Good.
We've got some great questions coming in from everybody watching. So maybe just to add a few of these. One person's asking, I have a few people in my life who are suffering from chronic illness, things like cancer, chronic pain, the aftermath of a stroke, things like that. What would you recommend I do for them? How can I help these people?
That's a really fantastic question. Yeah. Well, if I think back to what I've always found most helpful from others is when people are just able to be with me. They're not trying to fix me. They're not trying to offer advice. They're not running away, but they're able to just sort of be with me as a kind and loving presence. And that, of course, means that they're able to be with their discomfort about how I am. If I'm in a lot of pain, it's always hard to witness someone else's pain, isn't it? So the people who are just able, again, it's been comfortable in your own skin. The people who are just able to be there, kind, gentle, not making a big drama of it, not avoiding the topic. Yeah, simple human kindness can go an awfully long way. But I think sometimes lots of advice can be helpful. It can be helpful, but sometimes you don't want that. You just want someone to metaphorically or literally hold your hand and sit there and sort of bear it with you. And then practical things can be really helpful, just offering to do the cooking and do the shopping and bring around a meal. Sometimes those things can be, never underestimate the power of those things.
That was great advice. So another person asked, you have done and achieved so much in your life. How do you maintain energy and drive to keep developing new programs and ideas?
So maybe I'll just touch in here on this other program that we mentioned at the beginning, the
Yeah,
mindfulness.
please do. I was hoping we would get to that.
Yes. So something that I've noticed myself over the years, many, many years that I've been working on myself, is that phenomenal change can come about through working steadily and slowly across a broad front. And by the broad front, I mean looking at nutrition, exercise, sleep hygiene, sleep habits, connection with nature, these kind of things. So in a way, what I do is I have quite a sort of complete sort of lifestyle management approach. It's not rigid and tight, I don't get too obsessive about it, but simple things like going to bed at the same time at night if you can, more or less, getting up roughly at the same time. I meditate every morning. I do qigong every morning. I go swimming a couple of times a week. I do my yoga most days. I eat pretty well. And I try to avoid inflammatory foods. Um, uh, Make sure I get onto nature, value my friends. So, the mindfulness and the meditation is really, really important. And it's massively enriched if you then apply awareness to how you actually live your life. Because it's perfectly possible, to have quite a rich and effective meditation practice. And then, stay up all night watching Netflix and have terrible sleep hygiene, and then wonder why you're tired, or have a poor diet. And so, I try to do some cardiovascular exercise. I try to do some stretching. I mean, I can't do anything very well with my body, but I try to do what I can. So yes, I think that's important. And then sort of vision, I think, is very important. I often say that all the work that I've done through breathworks and my Buddhist life as well, to a large extent, I go back to that time when I was in hospital when I was 25, and I was being told by the medical team, there's nothing we can do for you, just got to live with it. I was completely lost, broken. And yeah, the chaplain came to see me, which was brilliant. But I've had to pretty much figure a lot of this out for myself. And it's taken me decades. And I thought, God, if I can just help one person have a slightly easier time of it, then that's brilliant. So I've always been very clear. I just want to help people. And if someone says to me now, why do you keep working so hard? I say, I just want to help people. I just want to help people. So I'm not doing it in a way, it's not about me and my career. But it's like, just there's so much suffering in the world. And we can release a lot of this secondary reactive suffering. We can. There's so much suffering in the world, and so much of it is what we could call unnecessary. And if I can do my little bit to help people cultivate these skills and these tools to let go of the secondary chaos, then that's highly motivating. Highly motivating. And it's simple. The older I get and the more I teach, the more simple my approach becomes. Like let go of the fist. It's not highly conceptually complicated. It's, I think mindfulness and awareness, it can be a very sort of simple, in the moment, kind, warm approach to things, and anyone can do it.
That's beautiful. Such a great answer. So let's see, hopefully maybe one or two more questions. Let's see how this goes. So another person wrote, having social anxiety, it's very difficult for me to connect with people. What can one do when they allow themselves to fall apart, but don't find anyone to scoop them up or help them find the path?
Yeah, thank you for that question. That's very moving. I mean, I used to have a lot of social anxiety as well, actually. We've got quite a lot in common.
Yeah, we do. We do.
Yeah. I suppose it would be, yeah, I mean, the social anxiety can be the thing that you work on. So that can be, I've worked on the physical pain, and I was very, very shy, extremely shy when I was younger. I mean, as a child, sort of pathologically shy. Um, so it might be for this person, that the social anxiety is the thing that you decide, oh, maybe let this be the thing that I work on. So come into the body. Where do I feel it in the body? The fizzing in the solar plexus and the pounding heart, these kind of things. How can I let go of the bracing, soften, and then seek out community is what I would say. Seek out some kind of community where you can take these little steps to allow yourself to be seen, allow yourselves to be met. You just need one friend. You just need one friend to walk beside you, and then gradually let go of the struggle. So fall apart, I use that language of falling apart, which I did, but it wasn't sort of like one massive big falling apart. It was like lots of little moments where I let go of my defenses, let go of my bracing, let in the grief. Lots of little moments where I let people in. And I think we can all do that. And in a way, we just need one person. But yeah, seeking out community somehow or other, either online or in person, I think is important. And then bringing everything we've talked about today to the social anxiety as the sort of primary pain.
Yeah. So maybe one final question here. Any insights into dealing with chronic fatigue and brain fog?
Yeah, well, we've taught a lot of people with chronic fatigue. We've taught a lot of people with long COVID, this kind of thing, and brain fog. Again, I think it's all these same approaches can work with those kind of conditions. Finding this middle way between pushing away, because with chronic fatigue, we can get driven or we can be overwhelmed. We can definitely do that with chronic fatigue, because the energy resource is limited, of course. So again, if you're overwhelmed, then obviously resting and then broadening, intentionally kind of broadening, regrouping. And if you notice you're really overdoing it, then just resting, coming closer. And at breathwork, we teach 3 weeks of our 8-week program is about pacing. Pacing is a really crucial thing for people with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, this kind of thing, where you don't have much in the tank. So with pacing, we do it where, it's quite systematic, where you keep diaries and so on, but you end up using a timer. So if I'm working at my desk, I'll set my timer. After 25 minutes, I'll make sure I move my body. And I've learned that through the pacing module. And what I used to do is, I'd sit at my desk until I was in absolute agony, maybe 3 hours, and then I'd be utterly wrecked for the rest of the day. So learning how to pace was hugely important for me. So that kind of thing's important. Brain fog, things like the body scan, very, very good. It's not a sort of, you're not needing to use reflection or any sort of intellectual sharpness to do a body scan. But when you do that kind of practice, you are regulating your nervous system. There's lots of evidence now about the vagus nerve and, coming into the body, bringing the parasympathetic nervous system online a bit more, which is the calming side of the nervous system, is really good, because many of us in the modern world are a bit overactivated. So we're a bit hyper aroused, sympathetic overactivity. And I think sometimes with things like chronic fatigue and so on, we can be in these states of because we're so tired, we have to sort of rouse ourselves a bit too much. And then that, of course, causes more tiredness. So the body scan, I think, can be just super helpful for lots and lots of people. And the brain fog. And if you go to sleep, I always say, don't worry if you go to sleep. You're probably tired and need a rest.
Yeah, that was, learning to meditate with Mingyur Rinpoche. That was one of the kind of seismic shifts in my own meditation practice and really my life, when all these things, even in meditation, I felt like were the kind of the bad meditation box, like, oh, I'm too tired, racing thoughts, physical pain. He's like, no, just bring awareness to that. Just like explore the experience of feeling fatigue and sleepiness rather than trying to do something to get rid of it. Like that can become the jumping off point for a whole inner exploration.
Yeah, perfect. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So unfortunately, I feel like we could talk for hours here. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our time. Any just kind of final thoughts or words of advice for everybody who's listening? This has been so incredibly inspiring, Vidyamala. Really, thank you so much. Anything you'd like to share just to round this out?
Well, during the pandemic, I had a little slogan that I sort of made up for myself. So I quite like slogans, little sayings you can remind yourself. And the slogan I had was take life seriously, hold it lightly.
Mm,
Take life seriously, hold it lightly. Because obviously the pandemic was very, very serious. But I knew the best way to get through it was to hold life with a certain lightness. Because we could all just get completely overwhelmed in a situation like that. And of course, the state of the world now is precarious.
mm,
So yeah, I think that slogan is still quite a good one. Take life seriously. Don't trivialize things. Life is a very serious business, but hold it lightly. Hold it lightly. Hold it with laugh. Hold it with humor, but don't trivialize. And it's a kind of koan in the Zen tradition. You have koans, which are you can't understand them sort of intellectually. So what does it mean to take life seriously and hold it lightly? But that's the invitation. See if you
mm.
can live that one out.
That's a
And it's
great
been
note.
Yeah, been really wonderful to be here with you all and talking to your court. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, it's been as I said, a huge inspiration. I'm sure I speak on behalf of everybody listening that your life, your story, your is incredibly inspiring and really just thank you for all of the work you've been doing, devoting yourself to sharing what you've learned and benefited from. So may all of your wonderful activities continue and thank you for taking an hour and spending it with us. It's been a joy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure for me. And thank you, everybody, for listening and watching or whatever you're doing.
Mm.
Okay. Thank you so much to both of you. And thank you, Vidyamala, this is very, very inspiring, this conversation. So thank you for being here and sharing everything, what you've learned through your life and uh, your teaching. And thank you, Cortland, for leading this in such a wonderful way. It was such a dynamic and wonderful conversation between both of you. So thank you so much. And I want to share just a few things, especially for those of you who might be newer to Tergar. I'm going to take a few minutes to just share with you about our Joy of Living program, which is uh, really the training program that we have within Tergar. So this is a deeply transformative meditation program with Mingyur Rinpoche. We have over 100,000 practitioners and followers around the world now doing this program, which is at joy.tergar.org. And we'll go to the next slide. So the Joy of Living online training, you can receive meditation instructions from Mingyur Rinpoche, who is a best-selling author, TED speaker, and spiritual leader, and founder of this Tergar program. So the online program has access to a progressive step-by-step program that will take you from zero, so the total beginner, if you are, to knowing exactly what meditation is. Become part of a worldwide community of friends around the world and learn how to better deal with stress, anxiety, and difficult emotions. And so the Joy of Living program has 3 levels. So the first level is called Calming the Mind. And in this level, Mingyur Rinpoche teaches us how meditation can transform the way you relate to stressful situations and challenging emotions, and how to embrace all aspects of life with mindful awareness. And then level 2 is called Opening the Heart. And in the second level, Mingyur Rinpoche teaches us how to connect with our innate capacity for loving kindness, compassion, and joyful appreciation. And then in level 3, which is called Awakening Wisdom, Mingyur Rinpoche helps us to awaken to our innate wisdom by investigating how things truly are. We learn about analytical meditation and begin to loosen our assumptions about ourselves and the world, which leads to a joyful life and open heart. And so we can go to the next slide. Just sharing one student's story. That these meditations have been really beneficial in my ability to express love towards others, even in small ways. And as I've opened up more, my ability to be happy for others or grateful for others' freedom from suffering is slowly shifting my own worldview. That was from Evan. We can go to the next slide. So the Joy of Living tools include monthly live webinars, meditation instructions by Mingyur Rinpoche. We have guided meditations. You can track your progress and daily practice times. You can discuss your experience with the community. And there's also now one-on-one practice interviews with one of the Tergar guides. So those are pictures of some of our Tergar guides. So you can start this if you like. There's a 10-day free trial. And again, you can find this at joy.tergar.org. And on the next one, just to mention that we have also events like this. So events can be found at events.tergar.org. And the next one we have coming up in March is 3 Life Skills, which is a workshop taught by Mingyur Rinpoche. So you can find information about that on our Tergar website. And then go to the next one. Finally, if you'd like to donate, Tergar International is a nonprofit organization. So you can go to tergar.org/donate, or you can use that QR code with your phone to go to that link. And I also want to mention that we shared, Vidyamala has her own programs, and which she mentioned today, breathworks and others, and we put those links in the chat. So if you're interested in learning more about Vidyamala's work, you can find those links there. So that's everything for today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for your questions. It's so wonderful to see everyone saying hello in the chat from all over the world. It's really a blessing of this online world that we can be here all together. So thank you, and we'll see you again soon.